On Saturday, July 18th, anti-data center protests erupted across the country. The main organizing group behind them was these guys called Humans First, which is chaired by Amy Creamer, a founding figure in the Tea Party movement, the head founder of the Women for Trump group, and she was a big player behind January 6th. She's been open about the fact that she's running with the Tea Party playbook again. Grassroots pressure, town by town, aimed at both parties rather than one. The numbers moved around as the week went on. Early reporting had it at around 50 locations. By Saturday morning, the count was closer to 125. The final tally that went out on the wires was 142 protests across 42 states, ranging from Wasilla, Alaska to Naples, Florida. Texas had the most, with 18 events, which makes sense because it's become one of the biggest data center markets in the country. Georgia had 11, California had 8, Pennsylvania, Florida, and Indiana each had 7. The demands were fairly consistent across sites. Transparency in how these projects get approved, protection of local water and environmental resources, community benefits, including union jobs, and some mechanism to hold developers accountable when they promise things and then don't deliver. 4 days before the National Protest Day, on Tuesday, July 14th, the governor of New York signed an executive order creating the first statewide moratorium on hyperscale data centers in the country. It pauses environmental permitting for any facility drawing 50 megawatts or more for up to a year, while the state puts together a regulatory framework. The order was justified on 3 grounds: consumer electricity costs, strain on the grid, and water consumption for cooling. Attached to that order is a companion policy outline that hasn't gotten much coverage, but is arguably the more significant piece. It recommends a baseline operator contribution of $1 million per megawatt of expected demand. In practice, that means a 100-megawatt facility would be expected to contribute something like $100 million toward local infrastructure, workforce development, housing, or whatever else the host community decides it needs. A state government is effectively putting a price on the right to build, which as far as I know hasn't been formalized like this before. Separately, Virginia, which is the largest data center market in the world, put a levy of 1.1 cents per kilowatt hour on data center electricity consumption. That took effect July 1st. The movement itself claims it has already blocked around $98 billion in data center projects and pushed more than 300 bills through state legislatures in the first half of this year. I'd treat that figure carefully because it comes from research tied to the advocacy side, and organizations tend to be generous when they're scoring their own work. But the New York moratorium and the Virginia levy are both independently verifiable. In other news, Apple is suing OpenAI over trade secrets. The filing centers on an engineer who spent 8 years at Apple before leaving for OpenAI's hardware division. Apple alleges he never returned his company laptop and that he used it to pull confidential technical documents on his way out. It also quotes a message he allegedly sent to a colleague still working at Apple, which read, "LOL, I found out I can access the network storage. So funny." Apple further alleges that within hours of leaving, he wrote that the colleague he was messaging continued discussing confidential projects with him while she was still employed there, and that when she eventually left for OpenAI as well, he advised her on which files to take and how to copy them without triggering security. The figure from the complaint that got the most attention is that more than 400 former Apple employees now work at OpenAI. These are allegations in a civil complaint, and OpenAI hasn't had its day in court. Their public response is that they take the claim seriously but aren't aware of any evidence the complaint has merit. And they've separately said an email mix-up is why they were slow to respond in the first place. Underneath this story are wider stakes, though. This lands while OpenAI is building hardware meant to compete with the iPhone, and discovery in a case like this is a crowbar regardless of who wins. There's a third story this week that rhymes with the first one, and it's happening in South Korea. While American towns were protesting the buildings, about 35,000 Hyundai workers were walking off the job over the robots. In late June, the Korean Metal Workers Union voted to authorize a strike after Hyundai announced plans to deploy more than 25,000 humanoid robots across its factories. The robot in question is Atlas, built by Boston Dynamics, which Hyundai owns. Hyundai's stated plan is to put them on repetitive production tasks in U.S. factories starting in 2028, then expand into assembly work by 2030. Those are announced plans rather than commitments, so treat the dates loosely. 15 rounds of wage negotiations failed. From July 13th through the 15th, production workers ended both day and night shifts 2 hours early, affecting roughly half of Hyundai's global output. The estimated cost was around 5,000 vehicles not produced and something in the range of $135 million in revenue. 4-hour stoppages are scheduled for July 20th through the 22nd, which is happening as I record this. Forbes described it as the first humanoid robot strike. That's kind of sensational, though. The union is also asking for a base pay of about $100 a month and a bonus raise from 750% of monthly pay to 800%. And really, that's a bit more what the strike is about. Part of the reason that bonus number is aggressive is that Korean semiconductor workers recently landed strong agreements, and the auto union wants a comparable benchmark. A completely normal, 100-year-old wage fight, so anybody selling you on the man versus machine story is skipping half the page. That said, the robot provision is real, and it's the one worth paying attention to. The union's specific demand is that no robot enters a Hyundai workplace without a prior labor management agreement. They aren't asking for a ban, and they aren't asking to be compensated for accepting the robots. They're asking for approval rights over deployment, which is structurally the same request the data center movement is making. In both cases, nobody's trying to stop the technology outright. They're trying to be present when the deployment decision gets made. That's a much more winnable position than outright opposition, and it transfers easily to other unionized industries and other local governments. One additional detail worth knowing: because Hyundai owns Boston Dynamics, it isn't a manufacturer buying robots from an outside vendor. It's a robotics company that also builds cars, and its own factory floor functions as a demonstration site. That gives management a reason to want Atlas deployed that has nothing to do with labor costs, and the union is bargaining against both motives at once. Suno, the AI music company, got hacked. The leaked source code reportedly lays out exactly how the training set got built. YouTube Music, Deezer, Genius, stock libraries, podcast feeds, 2 million plus files routed through a proxy outfit called Bright Data. Now, Suno has never pretended it didn't train on internet music. Their real position is that it's fair use. But there is a meaningful gap between, quote, we train on public data, quote, and code that allegedly documents deliberately routing around YouTube's anti-scraping measures. Because that second one isn't a copyright question anymore, it's a DMCA circumvention question, and fair use doesn't help you there at all. The timing's brutal. Summary judgment hearing in the U.S., plus a Munich court ruling on the GEMA case, both expected by month's end. For context on where the industry has landed, Universal settled with Udio last October, Warner settled with Suno in November, and Sony is the last major label still litigating. All of this comes from allegedly hacked material that Suno has not confirmed. IBM had the worst single day in its 150-year history on July 15th, dropping 25% and shedding about $65 billion in market value. That's a steeper fall than the company took on Black Monday in 1987. The explanation is more interesting than the number. CEO Arvind Krishna told investors that customers are spending less on IBM software and infrastructure and more on their own AI hardware and memory chips. Salesforce, Adobe, Workday, and Accenture all sold off the same day as investors priced in the same ships. So the bubble conversation now has a second version of the question. Not only whether AI companies are overvalued, but whether AI spending is quietly consuming everyone else's technology budget. Meta pulled an AI image feature from Instagram after several days of backlash. The tool let users generate images referencing public Instagram accounts by tagging them, and it didn't notify you if your likeness was used. It was announced on a Tuesday and removed by Friday. The Actors Union advised its members to opt out. The underlying dispute is one that keeps recurring, whether people should have to opt out of having their face used, or whether companies should meet affirmative permission first. And a study of roughly 1 million social posts found that 41% of long-form LinkedIn posts are now fully AI-generated. On X, it was 25% fully AI-written, with another 23% AI assisted. Reddit and Substack came in around 10%. One methodological note: the study sampled what users were actually served through a browser extension rather than everything posted, so it's better read as a measure of what's in your feed than what exists overall.